Black Maid steals billionaire's money to save his dying daughter. What happens next will shock you. What if the person you trusted most in your home was willing to risk everything just to save someone you love? Clara Washington had been cleaning the marble floors of the Blackwood mansion for 12 years, watching little Emma grow from a toddler taking her first wobbly steps to a bright 8-year-old with curious eyes and endless questions. But tonight, as Clara stood in the darkened hallway outside Mr. Blackwood's study, her weathered hands trembling as she reached for the handle of his private safe, she wasn't thinking about the 20 years in prison she could face for what she was about to do. All she could think about was Emma's pale face this morning when she'd collapsed during breakfast, too weak to even finish her favorite pancakes. The doctors had been calling for weeks, but Richard Blackwood was always too busy with board meetings and business deals to take their calls. Someone had to save that little girl, even if it meant destroying everything Clara had worked for. Where are you watching from tonight, and have you ever had to make an impossible choice for someone you love? The Blackwood estate sat like a monument to success on 30 acres of perfectly manicured lawns, but inside its walls, Clara saw what money couldn't buy. She'd arrived each morning at 6 sharp for over a decade, quietly moving through rooms filled with priceless art and furniture that no one ever seemed to truly enjoy. Richard Blackwood had hired her just months after his wife Sarah died in that terrible car accident, and back then, little Emma was just a grieving toddler who clung to Clara's apron strings like a lifeline. Clara remembered those early days when Mr. Blackwood would sometimes join them for breakfast, his tie slightly crooked and his eyes still red from crying. But as the years passed and his business empire grew larger, those moments became memories. Now Emma ate her meals alone in the vast dining room while her father flew between New York, London, and Tokyo, building his fortune higher and higher like walls around his heart. "Miss Clara, why does Daddy never eat with me anymore?" Emma had asked just last week, her small hand reaching across the breakfast table. Clara had smoothed the child's golden hair and promised that Daddy loved her very much, but the words felt hollow even as she spoke them. She'd been the one teaching Emma to ride her bike, helping with homework, and holding her during thunderstorms when nightmares came calling. But lately, Emma had been different. The rosy cheeks Clara remembered were now pale and thin, and the child who once raced through the house playing hide-and-seek now needed afternoon naps just to make it through dinner. Clara had mentioned her concerns to Mr. Blackwood during his brief visits home, but he'd merely nodded and promised to look into it, before disappearing into his study with another stack of contracts. 3 weeks ago, Dr. Martinez had called the house 6 times in one day. Clara had taken the messages, each one more urgent than the last, but Mr. Blackwood's assistant kept saying he was unavailable. That's when Clara knew she might be the only person standing between Emma and a tragedy that money could prevent but neglect might cause. The morning Emma collapsed changed everything. Clara had been humming softly while flipping pancakes, the same tune Emma's mother used to sing, when she heard the small thud from the dining room. She found the little girl crumpled on the oriental rug, her breakfast scattered across the floor and her breathing shallow and rapid. "Emma, baby, talk to me," Clara whispered, gathering the child into her arms. Emma's skin felt like paper, and her lips had a frightening blue tint that made Clara's chest tighten with fear. She called 911, then tried Mr. Blackwood's cell phone 6 times while the ambulance screamed toward the hospital. At the emergency room, Dr. Martinez took Clara aside with grave eyes. "Mrs. Washington, Emma's condition has deteriorated significantly. The tests we've been trying to run for months show she needs immediate specialized treatment. Without it..." She didn't need to finish the sentence. Clara could see the truth written in the doctor's tired face. "How much?" Clara asked, though she dreaded the answer. "The initial treatment alone is $200,000. Insurance will cover some of it, but Mr. Blackwood's policy has specific requirements that need his authorization." Clara spent the next 4 hours calling every number she had for Richard Blackwood. His secretary, his assistant, his business partner, even his lawyer. Each person gave her the same polite runaround. Mr. Blackwood was in critical negotiations and couldn't be disturbed. Finally, his assistant Patricia suggested Clara handle things until he returned from Singapore next week. Handle things. As if a child's life was just another household task to be managed. That evening, Clara sat beside Emma's hospital bed, watching the rise and fall of the small chest beneath the thin blanket. Emma stirred, opening eyes that seemed too large for her pale face. "Miss Clara, am I going to be okay?" the little girl whispered. Clara took Emma's tiny hand in both of hers, feeling the delicate bones beneath skin that seemed translucent. "Yes, sweetheart. Miss Clara is going to make sure you're okay." If this moment has touched your heart, please give this video a thumbs up. Sometimes the people who love us most aren't related by blood, but by the choices they make when everything hangs in the balance. Clara had cleaned Richard Blackwood's study countless times, dusting the mahogany desk where he signed million-dollar deals and polishing the bronze sculptures that cost more than most people's homes. She knew about the safe behind the false panel, had seen the combination entered so many times during late-night phone calls that the numbers were burned into her memory. Emma's birthday, the only date that seemed to matter to him anymore. Standing in the darkness at 2 in the morning, Clara's hands shook as she dialed the familiar sequence. The safe opened with a soft click that sounded like thunder in the silence. Inside, neat stacks of cash sat beside important documents and jewelry that once belonged to Sarah Blackwood. Clara had never stolen so much as a paperclip in her entire life, but as she reached for the money Emma desperately needed, she thought about the little girl who'd wrapped her arms around Clara's neck that afternoon and whispered, "I'm scared, Miss Clara." The irony wasn't lost on her. Here she was, taking money from the one person who should have been moving heaven and earth to save his own daughter. Clara counted out exactly what Dr. Martinez had said they needed, no more, no less. She'd written a note explaining everything and left it in the safe where the money had been. If she was going to prison for this, at least Richard Blackwood would know why. But as Clara was closing the safe, she heard footsteps in the hallway. Her heart hammered against her ribs as the study door opened and the lights flickered on. Richard Blackwood stood in the doorway, still wearing his expensive suit from his flight, his tie loosened and his usually perfect hair disheveled. He looked at Clara, then at the money in her hands, and for a long moment, neither of them spoke. "Patricia told me about Emma," he said finally, his voice rough with exhaustion. "I got the first flight back from Singapore." Clara straightened her shoulders, preparing for the worst. "Mr. Blackwood, I can explain." "No," he interrupted, and Clara was surprised to see tears gathering in his eyes. "I should be the one explaining. Clara, His voice broke, and suddenly this powerful man who commanded boardrooms and built empires looked like nothing more than a frightened father who'd almost lost the most important thing in his world. Have you ever watched someone realize they'd been running from the very thing they should have been running toward? Share your thoughts in the comments below, because sometimes our greatest mistakes teach us our most important lessons. Richard Blackwood crossed the study and sank heavily into his leather chair, his face buried in his hands. "After Sarah died, I threw myself into work because it was the only way I could function. Every time I looked at Emma, I saw Sarah's eyes, Sarah's smile, and the pain was." He looked up at Clara, his eyes red with unshed tears. "I thought if I could just build something big enough, successful enough, it would somehow make up for not being able to save her mother." Clara clutched the money tighter, still unsure where this conversation was heading. "Mr. Blackwood, Emma needs this treatment tonight. The doctors said." "I know." He reached into his jacket and pulled out his phone, dialing Dr. Martinez's emergency number. "Dr. Martinez? This is Richard Blackwood. Yes, I know what time it is. I want you to do whatever Emma needs, and I mean whatever. Money is no object." He paused, listening. "Clara Washington is my daughter's guardian in every way that matters. If she says Emma needs something, you treat it as if I said it myself." Clara felt her knees go weak with relief. She sank into the chair opposite his desk, the weight of the last 24 hours finally hitting her. "Sir, I want you to know I never meant to steal from you. I just couldn't watch Emma." "Clara," Richard interrupted gently, "you did what I should have done months ago. You put Emma first when I was too much of a coward to face what was happening." He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the grounds where Emma had played just days ago. "I lost myself after Sarah died, and in doing so, I almost lost Emma too. But you never stopped being there for her. He turned back to Clara, and she was struck by how much older he looked than his 42 years. That money you were taking. It's yours. Consider it a bonus for being the mother Emma needed when I couldn't be the father she deserved. Clara's eyes filled with tears. She's going to be okay, isn't she? With the treatment Dr. Martinez described, and with you there to love her back to health? Yes, she's going to be more than okay. If you've been moved by this story of love, sacrifice and redemption, please subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming tales that remind us what truly matters in life. 6 months later, Clara stood in the kitchen of the Blackwood mansion, but everything had changed. The formal dining room where Emma once ate alone had been transformed into a cozy breakfast nook where father and daughter shared morning pancakes every day before school. Richard had restructured his entire business, promoting trusted executives to handle overseas operations so he could be home for dinner, homework help, and bedtime stories. Emma bounced into the kitchen, her cheeks rosy and her eyes bright with health and happiness. Miss Clara, Daddy said we're going to plant a garden this weekend. Can we grow the flowers like Mommy used to have? Clara smiled, watching Richard follow his daughter into the room, his tie askew and his hair mussed from their morning tickle fight. Of course, sweetheart. Your mommy would love knowing you and your daddy were growing flowers together. Richard caught Clara's eye over Emma's head and mouthed, "Thank you," for what felt like the 100th time. The criminal charges, of course, had never materialized. Instead, Clara had been given a raise, full health benefits, and something more valuable than money. The knowledge that her leap of faith had saved not just Emma's life, but had brought a father and daughter back to each other. That evening, as Clara prepared to leave for her own apartment, she found Richard in his study. The safe stood open, but now it held Emma's artwork alongside the important documents, and photos of the three of them at Emma's recent school play had replaced some of the cold business awards. "Clara," he said, looking up from where he was reviewing Emma's latest report card, "I've been thinking. This house is too big for just Emma and me. Would you consider moving into the guest wing permanently? Emma keeps asking when you're going to come home." Clara felt her heart swell with the kind of joy she thought she'd lost when her own children grew up and moved away. "I think Emma's got the right idea about what makes a real family. Sometimes the greatest treasures aren't found in safes or bank accounts, but in the love we show each other when everything hangs in the balance." If you enjoyed this story, please remember to like this video, share your thoughts in the comments about what family means to you, and subscribe for more heartwarming stories that remind us love always finds a way. Thank you for joining us on this journey, and remember, the most valuable things in life can't be bought, but they can be shared.